Starting off this countdown, we have Henry Smolinski. Henry Smolinski was the inventor of the flying car. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Well, at least he tried to create a flying car. But he's on this list, so as you know, it didn't quite work out for him. So Henry, along with his partner Hal Blake, created this by pairing together a car and a plane. He took the wings of an aircraft and configured it onto a car. As you can imagine, they had quite a difficult time with this. During the first test, they experienced engine failures. In 1973, they encountered trouble with the plane wings. On September 11th, 1973, Henry and Hal were taking their invention for a spin when the wings detached from the vehicle during a test flight. The car crashed down into a pickup truck and burst into flames. Apparently, a bad welding job was responsible for this. Sadly, the two inventors lost their lives. Coming in at number 9, we have Thomas Midgley Jr. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps me out. So he was an American engineer and chemist. Sadly, when he was 51 years old, he contracted polio. But that didn't stop him from inventing. In fact, he created a system to help others lift him out of bed. He did this with a complex system of strings and pulleys. But in 1944, he became trapped in the ropes and was strangled to death by them. He passed away at the hand of his invention. In our 8th spot, we have William Bullock. William Bullock was an American inventor who created the rotary printing press in 1863. This invention helped revolutionize the printing industry greatly. The press could print up to 12,000 sheets an hour, and later it could print as many as 30,000 sheets an hour. Sadly, William passed away while trying to repair it. His foot ended up getting crushed under the machine after trying to kick a pulley into place. He survived the incident, but later his foot developed gangrene after getting infected. He passed away while getting his foot amputated. Coming in at number 7, we have Henry Winstanley. Henry Winstanley was the inventor of the first Eddystone lighthouse. The lighthouse was 8 feet high and 24 feet in diameter. His other designs failed, but he had high hopes with this one. In fact, he wished, and I quote, to be in the lighthouse during the greatest storm that ever was. And, well, his wish did come true. On November 14th, 1698, the lighthouse became operational. Here's the thing. Over the years, the lighthouse began to deteriorate. One night, there was a huge storm warning, and Henry would get his wish to be in the lighthouse during a storm. But the lighthouse was no match for the powerful storm. That night, the lighthouse collapsed, taking the lives of Henry and 5 other men. Moving on to number 6, we have Marie Curie, a great chemist who won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1903. Curie is known for a number of things. She discovered the elements radium and polonium. Due to her work and research, she is credited with inventing radiography or X-rays. Sadly, for her work, she was often exposed to radiation. This was before they knew the dangerous effects that ionizing radiation has on the body. She would often do her experiments in a shed with no safety measures. And apparently she used to carry around test tubes containing radioactive isotopes in her pocket. She even kept them in her desk drawer. So yeah, that's not safe. In July of 1934, she passed away from aplastic anemia as a result of her exposure to radiation. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Alexander Bogdanov. Alexander can be thanked for the invention of blood transfusions. That has saved countless lives. But he started doing blood transfusions to see if there were any rejuvenating effects. All throughout the 1920s, he was running experiments on this to try and achieve eternal youth. He had 11 blood transfusions and was adamant that it was helping him. He claimed it improved his eyesight and stopped his balding. Sadly, on his 12th transfusion, something went wrong. He exchanged a liter of blood with a physics student, but they had traces of tuberculosis and malaria in the blood. After the transfusion, his body began shutting down. On April 7th, 1928, his heart failed and he passed away. In our 4th spot, we have Sylvester H. Roper. Sylvester was responsible for inventing the world's first motorcycle. How it worked was it was basically a bicycle with a steam engine attached. For 13 years, he used his invention. It was cool, but it didn't go very fast. In 1896, though, he got it to go up to 40 miles per hour. On June 1st, 1896, Sylvester took his invention out for a ride to show off his new speed. However, while on the ride, he actually suffered from a heart attack, or so they believe. He wiped out and then passed away. To the witnesses around, they say the vehicle went off course and then crashed into the sand. But according to the autopsy, he had a heart attack, lost control, and then crashed. In our third spot, we have Horace Lawson Hunley. Horace Lawson Hunley invented the submarine, but it was never as successful as he wanted. His first design ended up trapping 7 sailors underwater. They all sadly passed away. So he went back to working on it to make it bigger and better. But his second model was a fail again. The submarine sank in Mobile Bay, Alabama. But that didn't get him down. He made another model. Sadly, this model took his life. On October 15th, 1863, Hunley decided to go on board of the submarine while running another test. Sadly, it sunk again, and Hunley, along with some crew members, were trapped underwater. Some did manage to survive, but Hunley did not. In our second spot, we have Valerian Abakovsky. He is responsible for inventing the Aero Wagon, which was a propeller-driven rail car. His goal was to use it to transport officials quickly across the Soviet Union. The car had an aircraft engine attached to it and propeller traction. It could go up to 87 miles per hour. On July 24th, 1921, Valerian, along with some other men, decided to take the vehicle from Moscow to Tula to test it out. They successfully reached their destination, however, they never made it back. On the way home, the Aero Wagon derailed and 7 out of the 22 men on board passed away, including Valerian. And in our number 1 spot, we have Franz Reichelt. On February 4th, 1912, inventor Franz climbed to the top of the Eiffel Tower. His plan was to jump off and use the suit he made to fly down to the ground. The suit he wore was a wearable parachute and resembled just a big cloak. At first, he said he would test the suit out with a dummy, but that day, for some reason, he said he was going to make the jump himself. Although past attempts with the dummy failed, he was still determined to try his invention out himself. Around 8:22 that morning, he was on top of the Eiffel Tower. He stood there proud and then stepped off the ledge. Sadly, the parachute folded around his body immediately and he plummeted down to the ground. He left a 5.9-inch crater in the ground, and as you can imagine, his injuries were gruesome. But apparently, an autopsy revealed that he passed away from a heart attack during his fall, so when he hit the ground, he was already dead. Starting off this countdown, we have Otto Lilienthal. Otto Lilienthal was referred to as the Glider King. Why? Because he invented the hang glider. In fact, over the years, he constructed 18 types of gliders and took over 2,000 glider flights. However, on August 9th, 1896, that was the last flight he would ever take. So he was on his glider when he lost control and the glider went straight into a nosedive. He fell 17 meters down and broke his spine. While on his way down, he yelled, "Sacrifices must be made." Sadly, he passed away the next day in the hospital. Otto's invention, though, had a huge impact on the aviation industry, so he would be proud. Moving on to number 9, we have Francis Edgar Stanley. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Also, check out part 1 if you haven't already. In 1897, Francis Edgar Stanley and his brother began developing steam-powered cars, and they created their own company, the Stanley Motor Company. From 1902 to 1909, they used their cars in races to prove its efficiency. In fact, they often would place better than gas-powered cars. In 1906, the two built a steam car that won a record for traveling the fastest mile, which was 28.2 seconds, which means it traveled at 127 miles per hour. Sadly, in July of 1918, Francis passed away while driving his car. It's not sure how fast he was driving, but he swerved off the road to avoid hitting some horse-pulled farm wagons and ended up crashing into a pile of logs. The crash took his life. Also, if you guys hear banging, it's because we're getting construction done and it's really distracting, and yeah. Moving on, at number 8, we have Max Valier. Max Valier is best known for his invention of the rocket car. In 1928, he created these rocket cars that could travel up to 145 miles per hour. He invented this because of his desire of traveling between Berlin and New York City in just 1 hour. A year later, he created a rocket-powered sled that hit 250 miles per hour. But that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to go faster. His end goal was to actually help with spaceflight. Sadly, he never got to. In 1930, Max started to experiment with rockets using liquid propellant. But it all went wrong when one of his rockets accidentally exploded. Sadly, he passed away in this explosion. In our 7th spot, we have Wan Hu. Wan Hu was a 16th century Chinese local government official. Believe it or not, he wanted to become an astronaut before the word was even coined. Basically, this guy invented a makeshift rocket ship that he thought would propel him to the moon. He tied 47 rockets to a large wicker chair. Don't come at me. Apparently they had form of rockets back then, okay? Anyways, then he had 47 assistants each light one fuse. There was a lot of smoke, a huge bang, and then when the smoke cleared, Hugh and the chair were gone. Sadly, it didn't work out for him the way that he hoped. Coming in at number 6, we have Luis Jimenez. Luis Jimenez was an American artist best known for his huge fiberglass sculptures. In 2006, Louis was working on a 32-foot high blue Mustang sculpture. It was going to be for Denver International Airport. Sadly, he would never go on to finish his masterpiece. On June 13th, while working on it, a section of the sculpture fell on his leg and severed an artery. He sadly passed away. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Thomas Andrews. Thomas Andrews was a shipbuilder. What ship did he design and build, you may ask? None other than the Titanic. Yep. In fact, he suggested that the Titanic should have more lifeboats. He said there should be at least 46, but no one listened to him and only 20 were added. Anyways, Thomas was aboard the Titanic when it struck the iceberg. He spent the last hours of his life helping people find life jackets and escorting them onto lifeboats. After he felt like his mission was complete, apparently he went into the first class smoking room and just stared at a painting as the ship went down. Sadly, his body was never recovered, but he went down as a hero. Coming in at number 4, we have Louis Slotin. Louis Slotin is said to be one of the brightest minds of his generation. At one point in his life, he went to London to get his doctorate in chemistry. And then he was actually recruited to work as part of a top secret team to develop the atomic bomb. He was mainly working with uranium and plutonium and other very dangerous chemicals. Sadly, in May of 1946, his hand slipped and he accidentally sent off a fission reaction. This released a burst of radiation hitting him directly. In one version of the story, he actually threw himself over the radioactive materials to protect his colleagues from this blast. He died less than 2 weeks after his exposure. I think that's incredible though, if he really did sacrifice his life to protect his colleagues. Like, what a man. Hit that thumbs up button if you agree. Moving on to number 3, we have James Douglas. And it's weird because I have a friend named James Douglas Ho, but you know, it's not the same person, clearly. I mean, unless he's a time traveler, who knows? James Douglas was the 4th Earl of Morton. In 1564, in Edinburgh, inventors were asked to submit their ideas for an invention that could kill people in a clean manner. James ended up inventing a guillotine-type device that could slice a person's head off in one stroke. Well, guess what? In 1580, he was arrested and charged with being an accessory to murder. He then was sent for execution. And what device did they use to do this? None other than the killing machine that he invented. So he quite literally lost his head to his invention. Coming in at number 2, we have Karel Soucek. This guy was a crazy Canadian stuntman that wanted to do the biggest and most daring stunts out there. One of the stunts he did involved plunging over the Niagara Falls in a barrel that he designed. The barrel was padded and designed so that he would be protected from the jagged rocks at the bottom of the falls. In 1984, he went over the falls and survived. He was injured, but he still managed to complete the stunt. On January 19th, 1985, Karel decided to partake in another stunt. This one, however, would be his last. So for this stunt, he invented a shock-proof padded barrel. His goal was then to be in the barrel and dropped from 180 feet and plunged down into a water tank below. Sadly, on his way down, the barrel missed the tank. It hit the rim of the tank and he was cut from the barrel. He passed away shortly after. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Lisi. Lisi was a chancellor from the Qin dynasty during the 3rd century BC. Well, he invented something called the 5 pains, or the 5 punishments. And it was a very brutal torture method. Basically, the victim would be subjected to 4 very painful and gruesome punishments. After the 4th one, the victim would be executed. So first, their forehead was branded. Then their nose was sliced off. Then their feet. Then their private area. And then, finally, they were executed. By that time, the victims were in so much pain that they wanted to be put out of their misery. Now, here's the thing. In 208 BC, Li Si was arrested and charged with conspiring to prevent Fushu from becoming the next emperor. He was then sentenced to die by his own invention. Yeah, I bet he wished he never came up with that in the first place. Ouch. I guess that's what they mean by what goes around comes around. Starting off this countdown, we have the gas-resistant stroller. When you go out for a walk with the little guys right now, you might throw them in a stroller. It's probably the easiest way to get from A to B without having to wait for the little kids to catch up. They always want to stop and pick up a rock that's smooth. Like, what is it with smooth rocks that seem so cool? Anyways, back in the day when there was a concern about chemical attacks, a gas-resistant stroller was made. The gas-resistant stroller was what looks like a metal coffin on wheels. It was all the rage when mustard gas wasn't yet a war crime. It would pair nicely with a gas mask that your mom could wear as she pushed you through the streets. Honestly, it's pretty terrifying, not gonna lie. I'm glad that this isn't a thing anymore. Over to you, Rachel.
Coming in at number 9, the Fliz. You know that one of the safest parts about riding a bike is the fact that you can get into any sort of accident and you're not attached to it. You can kind of just fly off and jump off before you land in a mud puddle or scrape your knee or whatever. Another great part of a bike is that it has pedals and gears, so you can move much faster than if you were running or walking, which is kind of the idea. Even if you're out of shape and you haven't done a lot of cardio, like the people who get up at 4 a.m. and go for runs, oh my god, those people are like on another tier, they're like gods. Then you can definitely go really fast on a bike if you want to. And what on earth is a Fliz? This thing is what happens when you mix a jolly jumper with a bike and are willing to look embarrassing for everyone to see. The Fliz is a bike with no pedals, so you have to push with your feet like a Flintstone. And now this obviously sucks because you wouldn't really be able to move very fast at all. They also built a harness into it so you can hang in there like you're some sort of baby Bjorn. Usually when you invent a new thing, the goal is to try and make it better than the last version of said thing instead of making it worse or really stupid. So I don't think the guy who strolls in on the Fliz is going to have a swarm of men or women around them being like, oh my god, marry me, I love you, because they look so sexy. They'll probably be looking at him being like, what? Is he okay? And how do you go uphill with this thing? You have to just run up the hill as you're attached to a bike? What is the point of being the bike then?
In our 8th spot, we have bat bombs. Yeah, not bath bombs, bat bombs. This next one is not only terrifying, but also deadly. When it comes to warfare, people can get pretty inventive. Imagine you're stalking past enemy lines in the dead of night, when all of a sudden, a web-winged furry creature swoops in and drops a bomb right at your feet. Bat bombs were an experimental weapon developed in World War II, and they are exactly as they sound. It was a bat with a bomb attached to it. This would detonate on or near enemies. The plan was developed and submitted by Lytle S. Adams, a dentist from Irwin, Pennsylvania. He presented his idea to the White House just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and they liked it and the project was greenlit. The doc assembled an oddball team, including a pilot turned actor, an ex-gangster, and an ex-hotel manager. The project was disbanded in 1943 because it was surpassed by a deadlier project. Stay tuned for that one later on in the list.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Urban Baby Window Cage. I can definitely see how this is appealing. Like, you want to make sure your baby gets a lot of fresh air, but you don't have time to take them for a walk when they're young. The Urban Window Baby Cage was basically a chain link cage with a pillow inside of it, so you could just plop your baby inside and go, look, a bird. Jimmy. Apparently everyone back then would have been totally fine with Michael Jackson dangling his baby outside his window because that's what they all did, apparently. The purpose of this contraption was so that your baby could get a little fresh air because you don't want your baby to get all stuffy in your New York apartment that's the size of a shoebox. And this was in a time when elevators were both scarce and the chance of them killing you was much higher. Think Tower of Terror, but real life. So walking that potentially very chubby baby up and down 30 flights of stairs doesn't seem very fun as just hanging him outside a window so you can feel the sun in his face and hear all the slurs that New York construction workers offer to the patrons on the sidewalks. If your kid ever gets out of line, you can just throw them in the cage for a timeout, you know? this is why we should forget this. It's not a good idea, guys. Let's just stick with like jolly jumpers and cribs that are inside. That sounds like a better idea.
In our 6th spot, we have the hydrogen blimps. Hydrogen blimps are labeled as one of the worst inventions of all time. Basically, it was like a big balloon in the sky. It would be pushed by propellers, and guess what they would put into the balloon to make it float? Hydrogen. Hydrogen was cheaper and more readily available, so they used it. Just there's one tiny issue with that. It was highly flammable. But they would pile people into this blimp that was fueled by hydrogen. And sadly, they would explode. In 1937, the Hindenburg, a German airship, caught fire and crashed in 36 seconds. It was very sad and very disastrous. But that wasn't even the first time that one exploded. Just after the Hindenburg, that's when people were like, "Okay, maybe this isn't safe." Now, history should never be forgotten. But maybe let's just never bring back hydrogen blimps, okay?
Coming in at number 5, we have plastic. I acknowledge that plastic has helped us get this far. It has been an important part of our development as a species. But just like when a young adult who has to shed their trauma that made them funny, but keep the funny, it's time for us to move on from the thing that is choking our planet. Like if you go outside right now and get a box of tea, the tea will come in a box that is wrapped in plastic. The box is already a container for the tea. Why are we double wrapping it, you know? I know the purpose is to increase the shelf life, but maybe we shouldn't be keeping things on shelves that long. Maybe? I don't know. We should seek out healthier food that doesn't last as long because it doesn't have as many preservatives. Thus, it would be stupid to wrap it in plastic. Just wrap it in paper or pour it into my hands. I don't know. Just do it. Or have no packaging and everyone just goes to bulk barns and puts it in glass jars and everything like that. I think that's a pretty good idea, but you know, who knows? The plastic, it lasts a little too long. Let's just say that.
In our 4th spot, we have the brazen bull. This is one of history's most horrific inventions. The brazen bull was a torture device used in ancient Greece around 560 BC. A seaside colony called Ocrigus was ruled over by a man named Phalaris. This device was commissioned for him. He wanted to turn torture into music. His court sculpture created this unique nightmarish piece. It was a hollow sculpture of a bull with bells and whistles attached, and there was enough room for the victim to be placed inside of it. The bull would then be placed over a roaring fire, and instead of screams, it was designed to sound like the grunts of a bull. Now, some say this invention was a myth, but famed poet Cicero states that, in fact, the bull did exist and was used. This remains one of the most evil inventions in history.
Coming in at number 3, we have the tricho system. There are plenty of ways to get rid of hair in places you don't want them to be. There's waxing, shaving, electrolysis, but this one invention deserves to be mentioned just one more time before we let history completely forget it. Never do this again. The tricho system was a hair removal device that became a must-have in every salon in the 1920s. And actually worked. It would remove the hair painlessly and effortlessly. All you had to do was sit at a mahogany desk and face a small window. When the flip was switched, there was no burning, just a slight hum from the machine. But it had some horrendous side effects. Yes, it would remove all the hair, but soon men and women would develop cancerous ulcers, carcinoma, and death. The reason? They were using X-ray technology, which is, as we know, radioactive. It would be administered to the skin for a few minutes and require anywhere between 15 to 20 treatments to be effective. X-ray technology was used for a variety of skin treatments around the time, and even in the late 1800s, like for ringworm and eczema. But when the tricho machine was released, however, there was no mention of what the technology they were using was. They were just like, the tricho miracle. You know, just picture like a typical 1920s ad. And the person administering it wasn't well qualified and didn't know what it was either. They just were like, flip switch, and it works. Clients were just marveled that it worked so well until it slowly burned their faces off. Of course, hindsight is 2020. How they were to know, let's just put this embarrassing, dangerous blunder to the side, shall we?
In our second spot, we have Agent Orange. This next one we're going to talk about should kind of be remembered so that no one ever does anything so awful ever again. Agent Orange was a pesticide that was responsible for 400,000 fatalities, disabilities, and 500,000 birth defects. It was invented by plant biologist Arthur Galston in 1943. He created it as a way to help accelerate the growth of soybeans in places with a short growing season. But in large doses, it actually destroyed crops, and the US decided to take this technology and abuse it. During the War of Vietnam, they sprayed the land, and 4.5 million acres of crops in Vietnam were destroyed by Agent Orange. And any exposure the Vietnamese and US, Australian, and New Zealand soldiers had to this pesticide came with deadly consequences. It caused an abnormal amount of miscarriages, extreme birth defects, cancer, and skin conditions. Some of the land still can't even be used to this day. It's very tragic and scary.
Coming in at number 1, we have the atom bomb. If the name Robert Oppenheimer doesn't ring any bells, maybe this will. Coming in at number 1, we have the atomic bomb. See, there it is. Robert Oppenheimer invented the atomic bomb, and the first one that successfully detonated created a mushroom cloud 40,000 feet high. What people did with this new invention, however, stole an unfathomable amount of lives and opened doors for even more deadly weapons. It also led to one of the most terrifying standoffs in history during the 1960s called the Cuban Missile Crisis. The USA and Soviet Russia were caught in a standoff, both with nukes pointing at each other, waiting for the other to press the big red button. Thankfully, neither did, but many countries have nukes in their arsenal ready to strike whenever they want, and they're also still used in a lot of battles and war today. Considering how much damage was done to Nagasaki and Hiroshima due to the detonations of Fat Man and Little Boy in 1945, oh man, I hope that day never comes, and they just should get rid of them. Like, no country should just have them, because we definitely know that it will lead to the destruction of the world if they're ever used. So we just should make an agreement that get rid, we forget, destroy all the ways of making them, just let's get rid. Albert Einstein was the man who prompted the USA to invent the atom bomb in order to combat the Germans in World War II. He believed the Germans were working on the bomb as well, but he found out too late that that wasn't the case, and they weren't even as far as he thought they were. He immediately regretted his decision, which is why the atomic bomb makes our list of inventions we should all forget. Just get rid of it. He's not the only one who wished it never existed. He's not the only one who wished it never existed. We should just get rid of it. Like, what?